There we go. Okay. I suspect a lot of you have already had some discussions in your teams about your organization. Here are the things you're going to learn. First is that not everyone's going to necessarily be happy with what they're assigned. Sometimes it works out well. But sometimes, you know, when you've got, okay, we've got, you know, roughly 12 weeks, there's 6 of us, and these are all the things that need to be done. It's going to be a challenge, not necessarily a hard one, but still a bit of a challenge to come up with an organization. Here is the most important thing you're going to learn in that process. Sometimes you don't get the job you want, or the assignment you want at your work. Sometimes you take a bullet for the team. Okay, it's kind of like, yeah, I'll be the tech writer. Though actually I earned some pretty good money as a tech writer. That's a whole other discussion. Anyway, the core question is, and that's my slide, why have roles and titles at all? And who was it who came and talked to me about the project you were on, where it was run democratically and how badly it ran? Yes. Give us another 60-second description of what it was you told me.
Sure. So I was on a project where we decided we'd vote on all the implementation details, and we spent most of our time just arguing over how we'd implement it.
You know, there are advantages to deciding who gets to decide what, and then supporting each other in those decisions. And that's especially true in a situation like this, where you're on a very short time frame. It's very easy. In fact, one of the statements you've already heard me make, it's very, very easy to lose a day on a project. It's almost impossible to make it up. You're not doing the next big thing. Well, some of you might be, but for the purposes of this class, you're not doing the next big thing. Make a decision, live with it, move on. You have the issue, if there is not a clear delineation of both responsibility and communication, things will fall through the cracks. I've experienced this personally. I thought you were working on that. Well, I thought you were working on that. Well, that's not my job. Well, it's not my job either. You need to be very clear, crystal clear, on who is responsible for every single task that needs to be done. Yes?
In one of my classes, we did a 5-person project, and one person was graduating. I guess they were like really scared that we wouldn't get things done, so they would like jump the gun and get other people's stuff done. And he did like 50% of his like whole semester project. And like it was just this terrible thing that kept getting worse and worse, because the more he worked on other people's stuff, the more they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And the more they didn't know how they could contribute,
Because he'd already done it. And not necessarily the way they would have done it. Yeah. Yes?
I was wondering if we'll ever touch on a very small minority of companies that claim to have a flat hierarchy, like Valve and GitHub, I think. There's a few companies that claim that there is no hierarchy at their organization.
Well, you don't necessarily need to have a hierarchy. And again, you actually draw an important point. The issue is not hierarchy, the issue is who is responsible. So it's not necessarily, you know, I get to tell you what to do. Indeed, if I'm a good leader, what I'm doing is out there, we'll talk about this is a big discussion in Peopleware on leadership and thriving teams. If I'm a good team leader, what I will be doing is getting as much stuff out of your way as possible and letting you do your best job. Yes, there are matrix organizations, there are flat organizations. Sometimes it's what it really boils down to is a rapid reshuffle. Often there's a lot of lip service, but the de facto is that yes, there are well-defined lines of communication. And one of the things we're going to talk about today and touch on, it's going to be in your readings, later is Conway's Law, which was mentioned. You should have already read it in Brooks. What's Conway's Law? Who can tell me? Ah, come on, guys. Huh? Actually, I think maybe chapter 1.
Was it the one that ended with handbraking?
No. Conway's Law is that a team, the architecture of a system under development will reflect the communications organization of the team itself. Which means what you want to do is organize your team around the architecture and not vice versa. I have seen this. I've seen this as a big disaster where you've had just a incredibly convoluted organization trying to work on a project, and the architecture was likewise incredibly convoluted and disjointed. In fact, when you read I have an article that is in a Webster reading somewhere called Remember Conway's Law. The illustration I use is the old Windows pipes, 3D pipe screensaver. And that's when I was reviewing that project, that's what kept coming to mind when I was trying to trace the architecture. It was the worst architecture. I mean, it was worse than no architecture. Well, we'll talk about architecture in a minute. Anyway, so you're welcome to take whatever approach you want, but you need to document it. What I want to see, what I'm most interested in are lines of communication. If there is direction, if it's two-way communication in the sense of peer-to-peer, double arrows, we'll see that in a second. If it's a management communication, meaning I'm overseeing what you're doing because I'm overseeing two things and I have to be able to coordinate them, then it's a one-way arrow. But document what you're doing. Now, why have an organization chart? First, division of labor. Second, to focus on individual talents and interests. What is it you're good at? What is it you think you can contribute on? In some cases, you're going to have people on your team who have specific technology skills. They may have specific professional interests. I'm really interested in managing quality assurance for the whole project. Great, it's yours. It clarifies responsibility. Again, if you have no communications network, then you have an exponential growth in number of communication links that have to be maintained. So part of what you're trying to do is to have a handle on the communications. You want, as I mentioned, remember Conway's Law, establish lines of communication that reflect target architecture. We're also going to talk about, this is another one of my articles, we'll talk about this later in the semester, but align individual goals with team goals. A lot of you join projects saying, I really want to do X. And if you're the only one on the team who wants to do X, or if there's only a couple of you, that's great. If everyone wants to do X, and no one wants to do Y, then you've got to start negotiating. Org charts. These are org charts. Some have some implied hierarchy here. Well, actually, they all have at least some implied hierarchy. We've got things here. One of the things, which I'll talk about in a second, is there must be a separate project manager and chief architect. I want both those roles, and I want them to be two different people. That's one of the most important lessons you can learn. We'll talk, when we get into Brooks, we'll talk more about the chief architect role. So, I mean, use whatever tool you want to use. Lucid charts, Microsoft seems to have done its best to kill off Visio, at least make it unaffordable. But, whatever tool you want to use it, and you can just post on your wiki a screen grab, PDF, JPEG, whatever, of it. Possible roles and titles. And you can, there are different ways, you have to have a project manager and a chief architect, but these are other roles or titles that you may want to use that have been there. I'm sure you'll come up with your others. Think about what your project is going to require. This is the begin with the end in mind. Think about what it is you want to demonstrate the last day of class And start thinking backwards about what's going to have to be done for that to happen. And from there, figure out the roles that you're going to have on your team. Now, it's not just an org chart. There has to be a roles and responsibilities. It's talking about these roles. So for each role, what are the deliverables that role is responsible for? Whether or not that individual in that role, and by the way, you can change your org chart as you go along. In fact, you may well get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 weeks into this and shift around either because the nature of the work has changed or because a task is done. You no longer need that person. Or people decide, I'd really rather work on this. Okay, well, I'll go work on this. But the question is, who has gatekeeper authority? Who says, yes, the architecture is done? Who says, yes, this is sufficiently good to release into production? Management communication lines with other team members. Again, if you do not have communication lines and it's just everyone talking to everyone, for small teams, 2 or 3 people, you can get away with that. But the number of communications lines goes up exponentially. What is it? 2 to the n minus n divided by parentheses divided by n, something like that. I think I have it here later. Describe, Silicon Valley is notorious for cutesy titles. Except a lot of them taken deadly seriously, but they're. So there's a great website called Silicon Valley Job Title Generator. So, and you will see, trust me, you will see these titles. Go to Silicon Valley and other tech centers. Anyway, so feel free to make up your own title, but whatever it is, you have to define what it is. Now, you may have, for smaller teams, you may have the same person filling 3 or 4 different roles. That's very common. For a larger team, you may have 2 or 3 people filling the same role. Now, what I want is, in fact, I'll show you. This is what I'm looking for. This is from last semester. Here on their wiki page, they have their org chart, and then they have their description here. They talk about, since they have teams, they talk about their team roles, and then they have their individual roles. And this link will be on the slides. I'll post the slides and lectures always, so you can get there, or you can just go back and look at it. Yes?
So there could be one person could have many roles.
Yep.
Is it possible for a role to be the responsibility of 2?
Yeah.
That's also acceptable?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You may have 2 people. Now, between them, they need to very clearly delineate who's responsible for what, because you want to avoid that falling in the cracks. Well, I thought you were going to do that. Well, I thought you were going to do that. Well, that was your responsibility. Well, no, you're part of this team too. Blah, blah, blah. Trust me, those arguments happen. Those are real life arguments. Been there, done that. Challenges in organizing a team. Deciding how you're going to decide. How many of you have already been struggling a bit to decide who's going to do what on the team? Anyone? Oh, you've all been great. It's like everyone's like, yeah, sort of raise my hand. So deciding how you're going to decide, and like I said, keep in mind this is a 1 semester class. The goal here is to learn the process. It's not going to label you in your job career from now on. Now, once you accept your first job, there's a good chance when you get your first entry-level job out of college, you're going to say, okay, Webster, you're going to be doing this testing on this particular unit. And you just sort of work your way up from there. Competition for prestige jobs. There's an old joke that the way you conjugate the verb to code is I architect, you program, he tests. You're going to have to deal with that. Available talents don't always match required positions. This is something to think very carefully about. One of the first things you need to do is assess what talents, skills, and we're going to talk about that stuff a little later on, you've got in the group and figure out who can do what based on what they know how to do. Don't forget you can reorganize and reassign during the project. If it's not working out, change it. And change it immediately. Don't delay. Don't sit and stew. Raise the issue. And for those of you who are project managers, this is going to be on your plate. Part of your responsibility is going to be to know what everyone in your team is doing and how happy they are doing it. One of the problems is you may not know what you need yet. Yes?
Is there a possibility that we might get fired within the project?
Hopefully not. If you have if any of you as project managers or as team members want to come kick someone off your team, come talk to me one-on-one, please. We'll figure out how to work it out. But here we're back to the orders of ignorance from armor, not knowing what you need yet in terms of skills, and not knowing what you don't know yet about your project. So, your assignment is that by Saturday midnight, on your team's wiki, you should have the org chart and the roles of responsibility. You can do this as a separate page and then just link to it from your wiki page. That's usually the easiest way. I will look these all over Monday morning. And what you will do next Monday is I will have someone from each team, doesn't have to be the project manager, but someone from each team will have to come up, will bring up your org chart, and you will explain, this is what we did and why we did it, and here's what we learned from it. Any questions? And I want those about 5 minutes, especially with how many teams we have here. Plus, you'll find that by about the 6th or 7th, it's like, oh yeah, we did the same thing. It's like a 30-second presentation. Any questions on the org charts? And of course, you can ask me questions all week long. So far, I'm extremely happy with Slack. It's working much better than email has ever worked. As far as just fast response and blasting stuff out to everyone. If you're not on Slack, get on Slack. If you don't know how to get on, let me know.
What would you recommend for roles, like in general, like a 6-person roles for a team?
What roles you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's different for every team, but in
Well,
general, what would you say everybody?
Let's look back here. What you've got, and I know it's almost impossible to see from there. But this will be on the, again, I'll post these slides. But here you've got project manager, chief architect, quality assurance, front-end web, UX UI designer, developers, back-end services, developer designers, database architect. That's probably as basic a division as you would have for something where you've got a front end and a back end and so on. Over here, we've got a management team with chief architect and project manager. You've got one person doing the front end, UI, UX. You've got a person doing the modeling. You've got 2 people working on the back end. And you've got 2 people here doing R&D, algorithm and external API manager. So, and again, in the slides, some of the roles I've got here: project manager, chief architect, designer, developer, quality assurance, librarian, configuration management, UX UI, tool builder, graphics and music artist, technical writer, database architect, designer, sales, marketing, customers relations support. So those are, in essence, you're going to have, developers. You should have a QA role, even if it's a role that someone is sharing that they're also doing development. And go back and look. I mean, the old projects are all there. Jerry Weinberg just passed away. Had the privilege of having communications with him off and on over the years. I'm especially Taylor, because one of the posts you'll read, he actually jumped into the comment section and criticized it. And I was tickled with that. And then I posted why he was wrong. But Jerry Weinberg probably is if it weren't such a thick book, I would probably have you read The Psychology of Computer Programming. Jerry Weinberg wrote it in 1971. And much like Brooks, it's one of the books you go back to and read. And he pretty much foresees all the problems there. He has continued to write over the years outstanding books, very much focused, a lot like Marco and Lizard, very much focused on the human and sociological aspects of software engineering. I was going somewhere with that. I was talking about Jerry. What were we talking about?
Quality assurance.
Roles, huh?
Quality assurance.
Quality assurance, and Jerry writes a lot of quality assurance. Oh gosh.
He wrote something that was wrong in that form.
No, that's what got me distracted. I was talking. It will come back to me, and I will bring it back up at some point.
The book you mentioned, is that part of the extra credit reading?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I've noticed that there isn't any role for like a scrum master. What are your thoughts on that role?
If you guys agree on you want to do agile, then have a scrum master. But I'm not mandating any particular methodology. Again, these are suggestions. You can come up with your own roles. You can make up clever titles. If you've got particular technologies, methodologies. There's no one here, for example, that's doing model programming. If you're using one of the models, the physics models for games, because you might have that. Boy, that's just sad. I know there was something I was going to bring up, but never mind. Okay. So, any other questions for this for next week? Okay. Oh, yes.
I noticed that one of the positions on the wiki said like kind of like a floating position, so like they just jumped in both roles. Is that?
As long as it's defined and the responsibility is defined, and the project manager is happy that that person is actually contributing. For those of you with larger teams, you may well want to have someone like some utility infielder, someone who just can sort of float around and fill in where it's necessary. For smaller teams, it's more likely that you'll have each individual will have multiple roles or can have multiple roles. Any other questions? Okay, now, one of the changes I am making this semester, for a variety of reasons, in past semesters, and this was something I inherited from Chuck and I used for 3 semesters, each of you individually had to report your billable hours each week. And there was an expectation of an average of 7 billable hours, and you could, have some slop carryover, or you could go into whatever. I found that really didn't tell me anything. And frankly, it was sort of unrealistic at the front end because usually the first few weeks you don't have that much to do. Certainly not 7 hours worth. And the other problem was that there was no visibility within a team as far as who was putting in time on the project and who was not. So, what I'm doing this semester is do a weekly status report. This reflects real-world practices. As an expert witness, when I'm doing a review of a disputed or failed projects, one of the first things I ask for are all the status reports because of the information I can gain from them. Now, often the information is, everything's well, everything's well, everything's well. Uh-oh, we're in trouble. But that's important to me because what I want to know is where is that point at which it finally surfaced to the status report that there were problems. This is a way to let me and Tanner, are you here? Oh, there you are. Let me and Tanner know what the status of the projects is and how you're doing. It increases intra-team transparency. one of you on each team, it can be the project manager or it can be someone else who's designated to it, but someone's going to be responsible for creating the status report weekly. It needs to be posted on the wiki with a link to it. I have an Excel spreadsheet template, which will just make a copy of and fill it in each week. Post it there. Tanner and I can look at that, but you as teams need to look at it. Indeed, ideally, you as teams discuss what goes into there to make sure you agree on the stats. And I'll show it to you for a second. And it tracks the history of the project over time. I've got an Excel spreadsheet. This is a template from a group of templates that I actually paid money for. And we'll talk about each of these fields in a second. So it's one sheet. You fill it out. Once you've done it once, you'll have less to change. In other words, each week you'll create a new one. You don't want to overwrite the old one, but you'll update whatever needs to be updated. And let's talk a bit about the fields. Well, I wish this were actually in the center. I know those of you who are having a hard time seeing this. This is angled quite as bit much. Stuff that's obvious: project name, date, project manager. Here is your current summary of the project. Now, I guarantee that most of your projects will go under some rescoping and redirection in the course of the class. So this is a way to reflect week by week what it is you're trying to build. Particularly as you say, that's not too much. Now, it doesn't look like it, but this is actually all one section here. You have your key task, the progress on that task, a status based on what you think, and when do you think you're going to finish it. The big lesson you're going to learn here is, what we're going to talk about in a second, how easy it is to get stuck at 70, 80, 90% and then slip and slip and slip. So this is part of your education. Here, this is for the week. What tasks did we complete this week? What tasks did we put off or suspend or are now delayed? What tasks do we have planned for the coming week? Here are the billable hours for each team member. And we'll talk about this more at length. Basically, all of you will be responsible for getting in to whoever's putting together the report your billable hours for the week. If you fail to do that, they're going to put a not reported there, and you will not get the 1% credit for the status report. Also, and we'll talk about this on a subsequent slide, whoever's responsible for this on your team, if that person fails to submit this on time, y'all lose 1%. So whoever's responsible for this, you want to make sure that she or he is very responsible and that you have some backup. That's okay. Come on. This last section is where you raise risks and issues for each week. What are the current risks or current issues, things you need to resolve or things that might cause problems? I've got all these described. Yes?
Is the project summary the overview of the whole project or
Whole
where it is
project.
so far?
No.
Okay.
Just our current snapshot in case, it may be the same every week through the whole semester. But in case you decide to sort of scale back or redirect or whatever, you can change the wording there.
Okay.
So here's a slide that simply talks about all the fields. This will be, again, I'll have all the slides up and the lecture up tonight. Status reporting, due every Saturday by midnight, starting this Saturday, so your first report will be this Saturday. You will, and you'll notice here you've got role or task for each person. You can decide whether you just want to put a title there or what that person's role is for that particular week. Yes?
So you said this is due this Friday, this Saturday?
First one is due this Saturday.
And what so for the billable hour, is it like only like the coding hour?
It's whatever time, it's team meetings,
Team meeting.
it's any research you have to do. And I'll talk about billable hours in a second. It's basically the time you spent on the project that week. Okay, so it's due. The template right now is out on the CS 428 website under coursework. There's a link to the Excel spreadsheet. I'll probably try to get this up or have Tanner put it up. Tanner, you gotta get you to do something. I kid. Put it right up on the wiki, main wiki page. I'll try to do that with all templates that we use for deliverables. Determine who is responsible. And this is where you want to pick someone very responsible, and you want to have backup. If there's an emergency and the person responsible isn't going to get it done, have someone else be able to step in and do it. My recommendation on billable hours, do it on don't do it Sunday through Saturday, because what you're going to get is a phenomenon of people trying desperately to get in more billable hours on Saturday and try to wait till the last possible minute to report it to whoever's doing the status report. I recommend you as a team establish a cutoff point, whether that's midnight Friday, noon Saturday, whatever, and that's when the billable hours have to be. In fact, I really recommend midnight Friday. So do it a Saturday through Friday for billable hours. Everyone has to get their billable hours into whoever's doing the status report by 8 a.m. Saturday or even midnight Friday or whatever, and that goes on there. Yes?
So if someone doesn't do a lot of hours for that week, are they going to lose percentage
No.
for the status report? Okay.
No, that's the whole point. I'm not going to necessarily grade on billable hours. Part of what I'm trying to do here is I'm increasing visibility within the team as to who's putting in time and who isn't. It's called peer pressure. But I recognize, and this is the thing that I've recognized over the past 3 semesters, often people don't have much to do for a given week. It's especially true early on. I mean, what's everyone going to do this week? Yeah, they're like, oh, here's our roles, and go look up this. Yeah, well, that's my point. So I'm not doing hours for the sake of doing hours. What I'm trying to track is trying to make sure that within the team, people see who is putting in time and who isn't. And if we get 3/4 of the way through the semester and you still have someone putting in 1 or 2 hours a week, that's a red flag as a team that you need to deal with as a team. But it's also a red flag to me. So this is the idea here is visibility. You're just stretching out. That's anyway. Any other questions on the status report? Probably the single most important thing you'll decide this week is who's going to do the status report for Saturday. Okay? Well, that plus who's doing what, your team roles. So, hold your team meetings, however you hold your team meetings, virtually, physically, whatever, get together. You may actually, we're almost done here, so let's take a few more questions, and we'll take a 10-minute break and restart again at 10 till. Any more questions on either the org chart or the status report? Yes, Tanner. Let's go, Tanner.
I was just going to ask, is this something that's going to be updated every week or a new one every week?
A new one every week. I want a history. I don't want the old ones written over. And you should post these on your wiki and simply have a page that says status reports and have a link to each successive spreadsheet.
That was my question.
Yeah. Yes?
So that means that the content of the report will be made public to the whole class, and it won't just be intra.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's true with all the deliverables. They need to be public because part of this is learning from each other. Yes?
Is there a reason you went with billable hours versus tasks completed?
Yes. Because it's how you will be, what do I want to say? It is to a large extent how you will be judged out in the real world. Sad to say, you will find bosses who care less about whether or not you're getting your task done and whether or not your butt is in your seat at your desk from 8 to 5. Yes?
I thought that was part of the salary, just to take that away and say hey, as long as you get this done, and also to not have to compensate for overtime.
In theory, yes, but you would be surprised. You would be surprised how managers will. I may have my daughter Crystal lecture. I've been bringing her in both semesters. She graduated from the U 3.5 years ago. Works at Point Mountain for a nice software company. But she's got some great real world stories. And one of them was they had to change in upper management. And she works from home about 2 days a week, and she gets a lot done. In fact, one of her lectures here I didn't post because someone said, well, how many hours a day do you work? She said, well, I'm working at home. It's maybe 6 hours a day. I get my work done, and I'm fine. And I thought, Chris, you don't want your manager seeing that. But they had a change in management who said, well, we're going to start having mandatory meetings at 8 a.m. each morning. We want all hands here. And that's straight out of what not to do in peopleware. So yes, the theory, now our theory of salary is as long as you're getting work done, it doesn't matter. The management's theory of salary is we're going to make you work 70 hours a week, but we're not going to pay you any more for it. So that's what you're going to find. Okay, any other questions? Let's go ahead and take a break. We'll start again at 10 till.